What if I told you that three of the most ordinary words in the English language, words you might say every single week without a second thought, could get you arrested? Not fined, not warned, but physically placed in handcuffs, taken to a police station, and charged with a crime. These aren't slurs, they aren't threats against the president, and they don't involve screaming fire in a crowded theater. They're so innocent sounding that you've probably muttered at least two of them in the past month. And yet, right now, in both the United States and the United Kingdom, those exact words have led to real arrests, real prosecutions, and real prison sentences. So the question is, how can a phrase you use without thinking possibly become a criminal act? And more importantly, have you already said something that could land you in exactly that position? By the time you finish watching, you'll understand the hidden legal traps buried inside everyday language. The kind of traps that don't care what you meant, only what you said. And one of these three phrases has been used to convict a person who didn't even intend to commit a crime. We're going to get to that. But first, I need you to imagine something. You're at the airport, late, bags in hand, boarding pass clenched between your teeth. The security line is crawling forward like slow lava. You finally reach the front, and the TSA agent looks at you with that expression, the one that says, "I've heard every joke today, and none of them were funny." You're tired, you're stressed, and without thinking, you mutter three words under your breath. Maybe you say them to the person next to you. Maybe you say them to the agent as a sarcastic icebreaker. Whatever you intended, in less than 60 seconds, your world stops. The line freezes. Security officers move toward you while the agent stares at you like you just pulled out a weapon. What did you say? Three words. I have a bomb. Now, you might be thinking, well, obviously, that's a bomb threat. Who would be stupid enough to say that out loud? But here's where it gets strange. Every year, completely ordinary people, mothers, business travelers, college students, say exactly that at an airport, not because they're terrorists, but because they're joking, or frustrated, or simply not thinking. And every year, they are arrested, charged, and publicly humiliated, often before they even understand what happened. In the United States, making a false statement about a bomb threat aboard an aircraft is a federal felony under 18 U.S. Code Section 35. It carries up to 5 years in prison. But that's just the federal law. Individual states can pile on additional charges: disorderly conduct, terroristic threats, public alarm, inciting a panic. And in the United Kingdom, the law is just as unforgiving. Under the Aviation Security Act 1982, communicating false information about a bomb on a plane can land you in prison for up to 7 years. Almost nobody talks about this part, but the law doesn't care if you were joking. It doesn't care if you leaned in and whispered it with a smile. It cares about the effect those words have in the moment they're spoken. The legal principle at play here is something called strict liability in certain public safety contexts, meaning intent takes a back seat to sheer public risk. In an airport with hundreds of lives at stake, the mere utterance creates an immediate security threat, and threats justify immediate consequences. One man, a 32-year-old engineer from Manchester, said exactly those three words at Heathrow in 2023 because he was frustrated his luggage was lost. He laughed when he said it. The staff did not laugh. He was arrested, held for 18 hours, and eventually given a suspended prison sentence and a criminal record that now follows him across every border. A single phrase, 3 syllables long, altered the entire trajectory of his life. But perhaps you don't go around airports making dark jokes. Maybe you think, well, that's a very specific scenario, I'd never do that. Let's take this a step closer to home. Think about the last time you were genuinely angry. I mean really, deeply angry. Maybe it was on the road. Someone cut you off so dangerously you had to slam your brakes. Maybe it was a neighbor who let their dog bark for 6 hours straight. In that flash of pure adrenaline, your brain, your otherwise rational brain, almost certainly reached for a short, sharp 3-word phrase. And if you're anything like most human beings, those 3 words were, "I'll kill you." Now pause for a moment. I want you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever said that, even once, even under your breath, with zero real intention behind it? Because here's what the law hears when you say, "I'll kill you." It hears a criminal threat. In the United States, communicating a threat to commit violence against another person is a felony in nearly every state. Sometimes it's called criminal threats, sometimes menacing, sometimes terroristic threatening. Regardless of the name, the core legal test is not whether you actually planned to kill someone. It's whether a reasonable person hearing those words would fear for their safety. Your intent, your private thoughts, your emotional state, none of it matters during that initial legal determination. All that matters is whether the person on the receiving end reasonably believed you meant it. But the reality is completely different from what most people assume. You think, it was obviously a figure of speech. I didn't have a weapon. I was just angry. The prosecutor thinks, the defendant communicated a specific threat of death. A reasonable person in the victim's position would have been terrified. The anger in the tone made it more credible. In 2021, a woman in Ohio said, "I'll kill you," to a Walmart cashier after a dispute over a return policy. She said it with a dismissive wave as she walked away. She didn't raise a fist, didn't lunge, didn't even break stride. But the cashier, a young woman on her second week of the job, burst into tears and called security. By the time the woman got to her car, police were waiting. She spent the night in jail. The charge? Aggravated menacing, a first-degree misdemeanor that turned into a felony after the court considered her tone and the power dynamic. The kicker? The judge later said, "I believe you didn't mean it, but the law isn't about what you meant. It's about what you communicated." And then something unexpected happened. The conviction stood. No jail time, but a permanent record. Employment consequences, a loss of professional licensing, all from 3 words thrown away in anger. Now, I want to pause here and ask you something. I'm serious. Think about the last month. Conversations you've had, frustrations you've vented. Could any of those moments be reframed by someone else as a threat? If you're watching from the United Kingdom, the threshold is slightly different but equally unforgiving in practice. Under Section 4A of the Public Order Act 1986, intentionally causing harassment, alarm, or distress through threatening words or behavior is a criminal offense. And Section 1 of the Malicious Communications Act 1988 criminalizes sending messages that convey a threat. That includes spoken words if they're recorded or transmitted. A 2020 case out of Liverpool. A man in a pub argument shouted, "I'll kill you," at another patron during a football match dispute. The entire pub heard it. No physical contact was made. The other patron later admitted he didn't necessarily think the man would actually do it, but the Crown Prosecution Service pressed charges anyway, citing the context, a crowded public space, alcohol, heightened tensions. The man was convicted of a public order offense and spent 4 months in prison. Let that sink in. 4 months, for 3 words spoken in the heat of an argument, with no physical follow-up whatsoever. The law treats words as actions when those words cross a specific threshold, a threshold that is far lower than most people realize. This changes everything about how we think about free speech. The First Amendment in the United States is not a shield against these charges. In fact, the Supreme Court itself has carved out true threats as a category of unprotected speech. The same goes for Article 10 of the Human Rights Act in the UK. Freedom of expression is qualified, not absolute, when it comes to the rights and safety of others. "I'll kill you" is a true threat, and true threats start with handcuffs. Now at this point, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, I get it. Bomb hoaxes and death threats, those are obviously dangerous words. But here's the part few people see coming. The third phrase is the most innocent of them all. It doesn't involve weapons, it doesn't involve violence, it doesn't even involve you directly. And yet, it has triggered some of the most dangerous, chaotic, and legally catastrophic moments in modern policing. In fact, these 3 words have indirectly resulted in deaths, real deaths, and the people who said them never thought for a second they were committing a crime. The phrase, "He has a gun." 3 words, so simple. Maybe you're trying to warn someone. Maybe you're attempting to de-escalate a situation, or you overheard something you thought was concerning. But in the wrong circumstances, or with the wrong intent, those 3 words can cause a stampede, a mass panic, or even a heavily armed police response to an entirely innocent person. This is the mechanism behind swatting incidents, false emergency reports, and public order disasters. But the even scarier truth is that you don't need to be a malicious prankster to get arrested. Sometimes you just need to be wrong. Imagine you're in a crowded movie theater. You spot a man in a heavy coat on a warm day. He's reaching into his coat. You lean over to your friend and whisper, but loudly enough for someone else to catch. He has a gun. Within moments, the whisper becomes a shout down the aisle. People bolt from their seats. A stampede begins. Police are called. The man is tackled, terrified, only to reveal he was reaching for his phone. Who do you think the authorities will look at next? That's right, you. In the United States, knowingly conveying false information about an emergency can be charged as a felony if it leads to serious injury or a significant law enforcement response. In several states, false reporting is a Class E felony when it involves terrorism or mass casualty risks. And in the UK, knowingly making a false communication with intent to cause public alarm falls under the Malicious Communications Act or even public nuisance laws. But here's the twist. Even if you didn't intend to cause alarm, even if you genuinely believed what you said was true, you can still be charged with lesser offenses like disorderly conduct or reckless endangerment if the court deems your actions reckless. And reckless has a very specific legal meaning. You should have known better. The jury will be asked whether a reasonable person in your position would have foreseen the chaos that followed. That's not a comfortable question, is it? This is where the line between a good faith warning and a criminal act blurs into something genuinely unsettling. The 2017 incident at a US music festival comes to mind. During a crowded summer concert, a teenager pointed at another attendee and, in an attempt to get his friend's attention, said, "He has a gun," as a joke because the man was wearing a bulky vest. Within 15 seconds, a mass panic swept through the crowd. 37 people were injured in the stampede. The teenager, who was 16 years old, was arrested and charged as an adult with multiple felony counts, including making a terroristic threat. Even though he repeatedly told police, "I was just joking, there was no gun," the law didn't care. Because when you say 3 words in a crowded space and people get hurt, the intent behind the words becomes almost legally irrelevant. The damage was done, and someone has to be held accountable. But perhaps the most terrifying layer of all is this. You don't even have to say it in a crowded space. "He has a gun," whispered to a police dispatcher over the phone, intentionally false, is the core of swatting, a crime that has led to multiple deaths across both the US and the UK. Innocent people have been killed when SWAT teams, acting on false information, burst into the wrong home. The caller thought it was a prank, a game, a way to terrorize someone online. But now they're facing murder charges under felony murder rules because someone died during the commission of their felony. 3 words, a prank call, a life gone. Did they ever imagine those words would end that way? Of course not. But the law measures consequences, not intentions. And this is the pattern you should be seeing now, a pattern that ties all 3 phrases together. So let's zoom out. What's really going on here? Why can a handful of almost accidental words strip away your freedom in an instant? The answer lies in something criminal lawyers call a speech act. In everyday life, we treat words mostly as expressions of thought. But in the legal world, certain words are treated as acts in themselves, like pressing a button that launches a missile. When you say, "I have a bomb," at an airport, you are not expressing a feeling about bombs. You are performing the act of making a bomb threat. When you say, "I'll kill you," to someone, you are not describing your emotional state. You are performing the act of threatening. And when you say, "He has a gun," in a tense environment, you are performing the act of creating public alarm. The words become the crime. The moment they leave your mouth, the deed is done. This is why the defense of, "I was just joking," almost never works. The law doesn't parse humor. It doesn't weigh sarcasm, because in the immediate aftermath, the damage has already been inflicted on the social fabric. The airport has been evacuated, the neighbor has locked themselves in a bathroom, the crowd has trampled the innocent. And there's one more thing almost nobody talks about. Your words now live forever. In an age of smartphones and doorbell cameras and social media, the 3 words you whisper in anger can be recorded, clipped, and presented to a jury in high definition. The context that existed in your head, the stress, the exhaustion, the cultural nuance, is stripped away on video. All the jury sees is a person who looks and sounds like they meant every syllable. This is the quiet tragedy of our era. You can be convicted in the court of public opinion and the court of law not for who you are, but for a 3-second clip of who you appeared to be in the worst moment of your day. So where does that leave you? As we near the end, I want you to reflect not with fear, but with awareness. Because understanding these traps is the first step to avoiding them. The law is not designed to catch the good people. It's designed to set boundaries that protect the collective. But those boundaries are rigid, and they do not bend for your good intentions. The next time you're in an airport, frustrated and running on 2 hours of sleep, you'll remember the bomb joke that destroyed a man's career. The next time you're in a screaming match, your pulse pounding in your ears, you'll recall the woman in Ohio who lost her job over 3 angry words. And the next time you feel the urge to sound an alarm, to shout a warning about a weapon you're not absolutely certain exists, you'll think about that teenager and the stampede. And you'll hesitate. And that hesitation might save you. Now, before you go, I have a question for you, and I genuinely want you to answer it in the comments. Have you ever said any of these 3 phrases in a situation that, looking back, could have gone badly? Did you ever realize in the moment how close you came? Or maybe you have a story of a time where 3 innocent words got someone you know into legal trouble. Drop it down below. Let's start a conversation about this invisible line between language and crime. If this video changed the way you think about everyday speech, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. We all believe we'd never be the one sitting in the back of a police car for something we said. But that's exactly what everyone thinks, until the words are already out.